No one in the Thean Empire thought Earth would be a real challenge. After all, the humans had refused to join the Galactic Council, had shown no interest in cooperation, and had gone so far as to ignore repeated warnings from the stars. To most of the Theans, humans were just another primitive species, stubborn and foolish, living on a backwater planet with outdated technology and no real defense capabilities. That arrogance, that overconfidence, would be their first mistake. Commander Ziak stood on the bridge of the Theon warship Eclipse, staring at the swirling storm clouds as his fleet tore through Earth's atmosphere. The armada behind him was massive, dozens of dreadnoughts, hundreds of destroyers, and thousands of support vessels darkening the sky. The plan was simple: descend, conquer, assimilate. The Theans had done it dozens of times before. Earth was just another name on a long list of conquered worlds. And then they saw the banner. Floating high in the sky, as if mocking them, was a massive digital display projected into the clouds. It read in bold, terrifying clarity, "Welcome to the end of your invasion." Ziak froze. For a moment, he thought it was a glitch, a visual illusion. But as the signal stabilized and spread across every screen in the Thean fleet, the message was undeniable. Earth knew. They had been waiting. Still, Ziak pushed forward. Perhaps it was just a psychological tactic, some feeble attempt to intimidate. He wasn't new to resistance. He had seen colonies scream and cry and beg for mercy. Earth would be no different. But he was wrong. Before he could gather his thoughts, a massive object emerged from below the clouds. At first, it looked like a mountain rising slowly, impossibly into the sky. But then the scanners confirmed what they were seeing. It was a ship, a human ship, unlike anything they had in their databases. It wasn't just large, it was enormous, dwarfing even the Thean command vessels. Its hull shimmered with energy, signatures that didn't match any known elements in the Thean archives. The surface seemed alive, pulsing with light and data. There were no visible weapons, yet the threat it exuded was unmistakable. "Commander," said Lieutenant Sol, barely able to hide the panic in his voice, "we're detecting an energy buildup from that vessel. And sir, it's off the charts. We've never seen anything like this." Before Ziak could respond, a voice echoed through every Thean ship. It was calm, steady, and terrifyingly confident. "This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Defense Force. You've chosen the wrong planet to invade." The voice alone shattered any expectation of a desperate, unprepared species. There was no fear in it, no plea, no diplomacy. Ziak stiffened. "Admiral Hayes, surrender now, and we will show mercy to your people. Resist and face annihilation." But instead of fear, Hayes laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from someone who knows he holds the upper hand. "You misunderstand, Commander. We are not here to negotiate. We've been preparing for this day. Welcome to Earth, the place where your conquest ends." The moment he finished speaking, the human ship unleashed a blinding beam of energy that tore through the lead Thean battleship like it was made of paper. The explosion that followed lit up the sky. Ziak's bridge shook. The alarms began to blare. Officers scrambled. The illusion of dominance crumbled in an instant. "Return fire." Ziak shouted, trying to regain control. Plasma bursts erupted from Thean ships in every direction, targeting the mysterious vessel, but nothing connected. The human ship moved with impossible grace, its shields absorbing or redirecting the attacks effortlessly. And then, more human ships rose from the planet's surface, each one sleeker, faster, and more advanced than the last. "Commander, we're being overwhelmed," cried Zol, the second in command. "We need to regroup." Ziak clenched his mandibles. Retreat had never been part of the Thean doctrine. They were conquerors, warriors. They didn't run. But this wasn't a battle anymore. This was a slaughter. "All ships," he growled, fall back to the rendezvous point. We need to reassess." As the once proud fleet began its retreat, the human ships did not pursue. They simply hovered, in perfect formation, a wall of silent defiance. The message was clear: "You're not welcome here. Try again, and we'll be waiting." Back on the Thean flagship, Ziak paced in fury. His pride was wounded, his reputation tarnished. "How did we underestimate them so badly?" he muttered. Gul, the intelligence officer, looked up from his screen. "Sir, our data was outdated. Their technological growth, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. This isn't just a defensive strike. They've been preparing in secret." Ziak's claws curled against the metal railing. "Prepare a message to the Emperor. Request reinforcements. This is no longer a skirmish. It's a war." But even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his thoughts. What if reinforcements wouldn't be enough? What if humanity had already surpassed them? Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, Admiral Hayes stood tall inside the command center of the Terran flagship, his gaze fixed on the retreating Thean fleet. Captain Rohr, his second-in-command, approached with a satisfied grin. "They'll be back," Hayes said softly. "And when they do," Rohr asked. "We'll be ready," Hayes replied, never looking away from the screen. "This time, they got a glimpse. Next time, they'll learn what we're truly capable of." Rohr nodded. "The new energy weapons worked better than we anticipated." "They did," Hayes agreed. "But let's not get comfortable. This was just the first wave. They'll return with more ships, more firepower. And we need to be even more prepared." Hayes turned to walk away, but not before offering one last look at the galactic invaders fleeing into the void. They thought we were weak. Today they learned just how wrong they were. Across Earth, news of the failed invasion spread rapidly. The global broadcast systems, once used for entertainment and politics, now shared one unified message. Humanity had stood its ground, and won. People in bunkers, in homes, on military bases, everyone saw the same footage. Alien ships burning in orbit, human vessels rising like titans from the Earth. Admiral Hayes' voice declaring Earth's resistance. For the first time in history, the planet was united not by fear, but by pride. Old political rivalries dissolved overnight. Nations shared data. Scientists exchanged discoveries. Engineers collaborated across borders. There was no time for division now. Earth had been targeted and it had fought back. The next invasion wouldn't catch them off guard. In that moment, the banner that had welcomed the Theans at the start of the battle, "Welcome to the end of your invasion," became more than a message. It became a rallying cry, a declaration of intent, and across the galaxy, in systems far beyond Earth's sun, other empires took notice. The humans had answered, and they were ready for more. The Theans didn't just lick their wounds and retreat into the shadows. They regrouped, they rebuilt, and they rebuilt, and they returned with a fury. Barely a week had passed since their humiliating retreat from Earth, and already the stars above began to darken again. The warning lights in Earth's orbital defense grid blinked to life, alarms echoing through the highest echelons of human military command. The Terran Defense Force had known this day would come. They just didn't expect it to come so soon, and with such terrifying scale. In orbit around Earth, Admiral Hayes stood once again on the bridge of the TDF Resolute, staring at the massive tactical display that hovered before him. Countless red icons representing enemy ships bled across the screen, forming a vast swarm that filled entire quadrants of space. These weren't just remnants of a broken fleet. This was an all-out invasion, an attempt to crush Earth in a single, overwhelming blow. "Threxan ships," Captain Rohr said, his voice low, studying the incoming data feed. "That's a full battle fleet. Probably every vessel they had within 100 light-years." Hayes nodded slowly, keeping his expression calm for the sake of his crew. Ziak's message must have hit home. "They're not underestimating us this time. No one on the Resolute needed to be told what was at stake. If the first encounter was a battle, this was an all-or-nothing war. The Theans were coming with everything they had: dreadnoughts, destroyers, carriers, swarms of automated fighters. It was a fleet so massive it nearly blocked out the stars. Hayes turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to all ships. No one retreats. This is our home. We hold the line." Across the Terran Defense Fleet, commanders and captains received the order. There were no protests, no hesitation. Every man and woman knew what they were up against, and none of them flinched. In the command bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, General Marcus Steele coordinated the planetary response. Reports streamed in from all over the world. The defense grid was fully powered. Orbital cannons were charged. Missile silos across continents were online and waiting. Earth had united in a way that hadn't been seen since the formation of the United Nations, except now, the threat wasn't ideological. It wasn't economic. It wasn't even human. It was existential. The Terran fleet took position in a multi-tiered formation, each layer designed to counter specific Thean tactics. At the center of it all floated the Resolute, sleek, angular, pulsing with energy. It was more than a command ship. It was a symbol, a promise that humanity would never kneel again. Above the chaos, in the lead ship of the Thean fleet, the Imperator Commander Ziak stood tall, his mandibles twitching as he analyzed the human formations. "They fortified their positions," said Exo, his new tactical advisor. "They've adapted since our last encounter. This will be a costly push." Ziak narrowed his eyes at the screen. "Costly or not, we move. The Emperor demands Earth. And we do not fail the Emperor." The Thean fleet surged forward, a tide of metal and fire descending upon Earth's defenders. The silence in space broke with a thunderous barrage. Plasma bolts and energy beams tore through the void, the battle erupting like a supernova. The human fleet responded instantly. Weapon systems locked on, drones launched, countermeasures deployed. "Launch the drones," Hayes ordered on the Resolute. "Time to test what we've been working on." From the hangars of the Terran ships, thousands of autonomous combat drones poured out like a mechanical swarm of bees. Each one was built with precision engineering and armed with AI-driven targeting systems. Unlike traditional fighters, these drones didn't need pilots. They reacted faster, fought smarter, and sacrificed themselves when necessary. "Drones are engaging," Lieutenant Kaminsky confirmed from the weapons station. "Initial strike is working. We're tearing through their flanking ships." The drones weaved through Thean formations, exploiting weaknesses, overwhelming defense grids, and disabling engines with surgical precision. Even with their superior numbers, the Theans began to feel the sting. On the Imperator, chaos threatened to break the chain of command. "Their drones are carving through our outer line," shouted Inkul, one of the bridge officers. "We need to neutralize them. Shift all forward batteries to intercept drone formations," Ziak barked. "Crush them before they reach the core." The Theons adjusted, redirecting their weapons to focus on the drones. And while they began to score kills, the cost was high. Every drone they destroyed bought time for the humans to reposition, retaliate, and reinforce. Back on Earth, the battle was being broadcast live. Civilians huddled in shelters, watching on massive screens. Breath held, prayers whispered. Children clutched their parents. Elderly veterans saluted the sky. There was no escape from this reality. Humanity was standing at the edge of annihilation, and still they fought. Inside the command center on the Resolute, alarms blared as enemy fire raked across their shields. Shields holding at 72%, Kaminsky reported. "Maintain formation," Hayes said firmly. "We break now, we lose everything." Rohr's voice cut in from the navigation console. "Sir, flank ships report heavy losses. They're requesting permission to fall back to secondary positions." Hayes hesitated only for a second. "Approved. Cover them with fire as they retreat. Tell them to get patched up and be ready to come back swinging. This was war. Not a clean, decisive duel, but a grind. A test of endurance, creativity, and resolve. The humans weren't just fighting harder. They were fighting smarter. And for every Terran ship that fell, 2 Theon vessels followed. Ziak watched in disbelief as the tide began to shift again. How? He muttered under his breath. How are they doing this? Maybe we've been fighting ghosts this whole time, Exo offered grimly. Our reports, our data all outdated. They've evolved under our noses. Ziak didn't respond. He was beginning to feel something deeply unfamiliar fear. Hayes, on the other hand, was calm but burning inside. Push the line, he ordered. Take the pressure to them. The humans advanced, not recklessly, but with precision. They began breaching Theon formations, disrupting their command chains, isolating individual squadrons. Each ship worked in coordination, communicating through encrypted quantum channels impossible to jam, impossible to trace. The battle raged on for hours. Then something shifted. Commander, Roar said quietly, the Theons are starting to fall back. Hayes narrowed his eyes at the screen. The Imperator was turning, its thrusters flaring brightly. The rest of the Theon fleet began to mimic the movement. They're retreating again? Kaminsky asked in disbelief. No, Hayes said. They're regrouping. This isn't over. It's just beginning. Elsewhere, in the Theon High Command chambers, the news spread like wildfire. The Invincible fleet, thousands of ships had been repelled, twice. By Earth, the Emperor's silence was chilling. Ziak's report had already been transmitted, but the implications were undeniable. This wasn't a skirmish gone wrong. This was a threat to their entire galactic dominance. Ziak stood in his quarters, the lights dimmed, reviewing footage from the battlefield. Every hit, every maneuver, every drone deployment told him the same story. They had been fools. Humanity wasn't behind. They had been waiting, building, learning, preparing, and now they were no longer prey. They were predators. Back on Earth, the mood was one of both triumph and sobering awareness. The celebrations were muted. People cheered, but they also wept. Families mourned the lives lost. Engineers got back to work. Scientists ran diagnostics. Soldiers rearmed. In the war room beneath Geneva, General Steele stared at a large holomap of Earth's orbit. The red symbols representing the Theon fleet were fading, but no one dared believe they were. Gone for good. How long before they return? One officer asked. Steele sighed. Maybe days, maybe months. They will return. And us. Steele looked around the room, at the weary eyes of men and women who had stood the line. We'll be ready. We have to be. Admiral Hayes stood alone on the observation deck of the Resolute. The stars twinkled faintly beyond the reinforced glass. But his mind wasn't on the beauty of the cosmos. It was on what was coming. He didn't believe in miracles, only in preparation. They're going to come harder next time, Roar said, joining him silently. Bigger fleet, new tactics. Hayes nodded. And we'll have answers. They thought Earth would be easy, Roar continued. A forgotten rock at the edge of space. Now they know better. Hayes turned slowly. Now the whole galaxy knows better. Far from over, the war had just begun. But the rules had changed. The hunter had become the hunted. And Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a fortress. The sky was on fire. Above the Earth, the void of space had become a battlefield where hope and survival clashed with brutal reality. The second wave of the Theon invasion had come with full force, bringing thousands of warships, elite soldiers, and weapons meant to shatter planets. Their goal was clear, break Earth's defenses, crush its spirit, and erase humanity's defiance once and for all. But humanity had no intention of backing down. Admiral Hayes stood firm on the command bridge of the TDF Resolute, the flagship of the Terran Defense Force. The vibrations of distant explosions rumbled through the hull, but he didn't flinch. Around him, officers moved with calm urgency, barking orders, tracking enemy positions, deploying countermeasures. The lights dimmed as power rerouted to weapons and shields. "Sir, the Theans are focusing their attacks on our right flank," said Lieutenant Kaminsky. "They're trying to punch through. Tell the 4th and 7th Squadrons to reinforce that sector," Hayes replied, "and shift the mobile defense drones to intercept any stragglers." He glanced at the central tactical display. The screen was a swirling chaos of red and blue icons, enemy and allied ships locked in a deadly waltz of attrition. Human ships were holding, but the pressure was mounting. Already dozens had fallen, shattered into silent debris. "Sir, casualties are climbing," Captain Rohr said gravely. "We've lost the Vigilant, and the Odyssey is venting atmosphere." Hayes didn't blink. "Tell the Odyssey to fall back to secondary line. Deploy repair crews if they're mobile. Every ship counts. In the past, such a report might have sparked panic or fear, but not now. Not after what they had already endured. Earth had prepared for this. Humanity had hardened. They weren't here to survive. They were here to win." Below, in command bunkers, hidden beneath mountain ranges and shielded cities, the coordination of the global response was relentless. Generals from every continent worked together, reviewing real-time data from space, issuing defensive measures, authorizing launch sequences for ground-based railguns, and routing additional power to satellite shields. General Marcus Steele stood in one such command center, surrounded by a war council of military minds, analysts, and engineers. "The Theans are not letting up," he said, voice low but resolute. "They're testing every inch of our line, looking for weakness, and if they find one," asked a younger officer. Steele turned to face him, gray eyes hard as iron. "Then we fill the gap with everything we've got: metal, firepower, and blood, if we have to." The room fell silent. No one questioned him. Back in orbit, the battle had reached a fever pitch. Thean ships, sleek, deadly, and massive, rained plasma fire down onto Earth's defensive perimeter. Explosions rippled through the dark, leaving trails of destruction. But the Terran fleet fought back with unmatched coordination. Human engineers had integrated Thean technology into their systems after the first battle, and the results were astonishing. DDF ships now had adaptive shields that changed frequency mid-battle, advanced targeting AI that predicted enemy maneuvers, and propulsion systems that allowed for impossible dodges and rapid repositioning. "Enemy dreadnought closing in on the Resolute," Kaminsky warned. "They're charging a main cannon." Hayes didn't hesitate. "Bring the rail batteries online. Lock and fire when ready." A moment later, a thunderous pulse echoed through the ship as the railgun fired. The magnetic round sliced through space and struck the incoming dreadnought dead center, ripping it apart in a blinding flash. "Target destroyed," Kaminsky confirmed. Hayes didn't smile. There was no time for celebration. The enemy's strategy had shifted. When their long-range assaults failed to break the human line, they moved to close combat. Thean boarding parties launched across the battlefield in compact shuttles, aiming for critical Terran ships. On the lower decks of the Resolute, alarms screamed as breaches erupted in the hull. Fire and smoke flooded the corridors. Threxan soldiers, brutal, armored creatures bred for war, charged through the flames, weapons ready. But they didn't find a broken crew waiting. They found human Marines. Sergeant Darnell Rice led his squad through the smoke-filled corridor, moving with practiced discipline. "Hold the junction," he shouted. "No one gets past this point." The Marines opened fire. Bullets, lasers, and kinetic rounds filled the space. The clash was brutal, flesh against armor, steel against claw. One Marine was thrown across the hallway by a Threxan's brute strength. Another tackled the alien to the ground, detonating a grenade in a final act of sacrifice. Reyes ducked under a blade swing and shot upward through the Threxan's chin. As the creature fell, Rise leaned against the wall, blood streaming from his shoulder. "Command, this is Reyes," he said through gritted teeth. "We've secured Junction 7. Area is clear, for now." Across the fleet, similar stories played out. Engineers armed themselves. Medics became fighters. Civilians conscripted for emergency support stations learned how to man defense turrets. Everyone fought. Everyone mattered. Back on the Imperator, Commander Ziak stared at the battle in disbelief. His fleet had struck with overwhelming force, focused firepower, superior numbers, and new formations. And yet, we've lost over 30% of our vessels, Exel reported grimly. Their formations are holding. Ziak's claws scraped against the control panel. They should be breaking. Their losses should have shattered them. "They don't fight like us," Exel murmured. "They don't break like us." Ziak turned to the communications terminal. "Send a message to all remaining forces. No more tactical probing. Full assault. Overwhelm them." "Sir, if we do that," I said now. The Theans doubled their efforts. New waves of ships surged forward, focusing on Earth's orbital platforms. Bombardments intensified. Human vessels were forced to fight 2 or 3 ships at once. Boarding actions increased. The strain on the Terran fleet was immense, but Earth held the line. When the Resolute's forward shields dropped below 20%, 2 smaller Terran vessels flanked it, absorbing damage to protect the command ship. Both were lost, but the Resolute survived. When the enemy broke through a hole in the left flank, a group of civilian cargo ships hastily outfitted with point defense weapons charged into the gap, buying precious minutes for reinforcements to reposition. Even in defeat, the humans refused to surrender a single inch of space without a fight. On the bridge of the Resolute, Hayes surveyed the mounting damage reports. "Sir," Rohr said, eyes wide, "multiple ships are beyond repair. Some are going down now." Hayes nodded, quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Order damaged ships to fall back to the second ring. Deploy the TDF Valiant to cover the retreat. They've earned a second chance." Kaminsky's voice broke the silence. "Sir, we're detecting concentrated enemy fire. They're targeting the Resolute. All batteries, all ships. They're trying to take us out." Hayes looked out at the swirling battle, the red flare of enemy weapons drawing closer. "So they're finally serious?" he muttered. "Orders?" Rohr asked. Hayes turned, steel in his voice. "Prepare for close quarters combat. Arm all turrets. Ready the fusion lances. They want this ship. They'll have to tear it from our cold hands." The Resolute erupted with firepower, turrets rotated and locked on. Massive lances of white-hot plasma speared through the darkness, cutting Thean ships into fragments. Point defense cannons spat flak and ion pulses at incoming missiles. Boarding shuttles were vaporized mid-flight. Then came the crash. 2 enemy frigates collided with the Resolute, latching onto its hull. Morthrexan spilled inside. On every deck, humans fought tooth and nail. Marines, mechanics, technicians, no one stood down. On the upper deck, Hayes himself picked up a pulse rifle and joined the defense, holding a barricade near the communications array. "We hold this ship," he shouted over the chaos. "For Earth," and they did. Eventually, the tide began to turn. Across the battlefield, Theon command vessels flickered out, one by one. Terran counterattacks broke the enemy's coordination. The orbital defense grid, long silent, came back online with full power, firing barrage after barrage into the enemy ranks. The TDF Vanguard sacrificed itself to destroy 3 Thean carriers with a final, desperate jump drive overload. The explosion rocked the entire battlefield. On the Imperator, Ziak was forced to face the reality before him. "We're losing ships faster than we can compensate," Exal said. "We've lost half the fleet," Ziak growled. "Order a full retreat." Back in Earth's orbit, the humans didn't cheer as the enemy fled. They didn't pursue. They regrouped, tended to their wounded, counted the dead. They had held the line, but they had paid a price. In Geneva, General Steele stood before a global feed. "Earth has endured," he said, "because our spirit cannot be broken." We held the line not with the biggest guns, not with the most ships, but with courage and unity. Across cities and colonies, people wept and embraced. Flags flew, bells rang, but no one forgot the price. And Admiral Hayes, blood still on his uniform, watched from the Resolute's observation deck. "We didn't just survive," he whispered. "We showed them who we are." Rohr stepped up beside him. "And who are we?" Hayes smiled faintly. "We're the reason they'll think twice before ever coming back." The Second Thean invasion had ended in retreat. Their grand fleet, bolstered by elite warships and generations of battlefield experience, had been beaten back by a world they believed inferior. For the second time, Earth had stood against the stars and survived. But this time, survival wasn't enough. Earth wasn't going to wait for the next wave. They were going to be ready. The weeks that followed the battle weren't filled with celebration. Yes, the people rejoiced. There were parades in some cities, tears of relief in others, but the world's leaders and military commanders knew better. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Theans would come back, and next time, they wouldn't just bring ships, they'd bring extinction. Admiral Hayes returned to Earth with one mission: transform the planet into a fortress, a place that no enemy, no matter how advanced, could breach. And to do that, he needed every nation, every mind, every resource. Global unity, once thought impossible, became a reality overnight. It started with the Reconstruction Directive, a plan jointly issued by the United Earth Command and the Terran Defense Force. Every damaged ship was either repaired or scrapped for parts to build something better. The losses from the last battle weren't wasted. They were studied, analyzed, and turned into strategy. Terran engineers worked around the clock in orbital dry docks and underground labs. They reverse-engineered everything they captured from Thean wreckage: weapon cores, shield emitters, even fragments of their command AI. Earth's best scientists, once competitors in academic journals, now worked side by side in think tanks scattered across the planet. Breakthroughs came fast, too fast for comfort. It was as if war had awakened a dormant genius buried deep within humanity's DNA. Quantum drive systems were improved. Shielding fields were recalibrated to respond in milliseconds. Pulse cannons became rail lances. Combat drones were upgraded with learning algorithms that could adapt mid-battle. Hayes oversaw it all from his new command post, the orbital superstation Sentinel-1, a city-sized construct built in the upper atmosphere, shielded by Earth's gravitational field and armed with every prototype weapon the TDF had ever imagined. But this wasn't just about technology. It was about people. "Admiral," said General Marcus Steele during a secure transmission from Geneva, "recruitment numbers are up 300%. Every major nation is sending its best to join the fleet. We've even got former enemies working together in joint units." "Good," Hayes replied, his eyes scanning the latest personnel reports. "Because we're not building an army. We're building the shield of Earth." And for the first time in history, no one was worried about borders. No one was concerned about ideology, flags, or past wounds. Russian and American pilots trained together. Chinese and Indian engineers shared ship schematics in real time. African AI labs sent their findings to European robotics teams. There was no time for mistrust. The only side that mattered was humanity's. At the edge of the solar system, scout ships patrolled with vigilance. Anything out of place, any anomaly, signal, or distortion was logged and investigated. Some didn't return, their last messages chilling. "We're seeing movement, wait. There's more of them," engaging evasive silence. Each lost scout pushed Earth harder. Each disappearance was a reminder that time was short, but Earth was no longer frozen in fear. They were racing the clock. Admiral Hayes stood before the Command Council in a high-level briefing 2 months after the second invasion. Behind him, a 3D holographic model of Earth rotated slowly, surrounded by orbiting satellites and platforms. As of today, he began the Terran Defense Fleet has doubled in size. We've added 2 new battlecruisers, both equipped with dark energy beam systems and reverse-engineered Thean armor plating. Our drone production facilities are now outputting at full capacity, with AI-4 integrated into every core system. He paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle in the room. But more importantly, he continued, our people are ready. Our civilians have been trained in emergency protocols. Cities have reinforced bunkers. Hospitals have battlefield triage systems. Every child knows where their shelter point is. Every adult knows why we fight. He stepped aside as the model zoomed out. What we're building isn't just a fleet, he said. It's a statement. Earth is no longer the prey. We are a fortress. And the next time they come, we won't just defend ourselves. We'll break them, the new flagship TDF. Resolute. Aya was unlike anything humanity had ever created. Sleek, deadly, intelligent. Its hull was forged from a new alloy combining Thean nanofiber with Terran titanium, capable of regenerating microfractures on the fly. Its core was powered by a stabilized antimatter reactor surrounded by quantum failsafes. It could house thousands of crew members, launch hundreds of drones, and command entire fleets with a neural interface system that responded to thought commands from senior officers. It was the product of desperation, brilliance, and defiance, and it was just the beginning. Earth's orbit became a construction zone. Dozens of new ships rose from the shipyards: daily frigates, corvettes, command ships, stealth vessels. Automated factories in orbit ran 24 hours a day. Below, Earth's surface bristled with new weapon platforms, ground-to-space railguns, missile silos, MP nets, and plasma curtain generators. Even the moon was transformed, now home to Luna Base Alpha, a tactical command hub and staging ground for deep space operations. The message was loud and clear. Earth was preparing for the last war. The transformation wasn't only physical, psychologically. Something had shifted across humanity. Where fear once ruled, now there was purpose. In schools, children learned about orbital mechanics alongside algebra. In neighborhoods, civil defense drills were as normal as fire alarms. People wore badges of family members in the fleet, prayed together in churches, temples, and mosques. Songs were written, memorials were built, but more than anything, people believed. They believed Earth could win. Hayes often walked the corridors of Sentinel-1 alone at night, unable to sleep. Despite the momentum, there was a pressure on his chest that never left. It wasn't just responsibility, it was fear of what came next. He remembered what the Thean fleet looked like, how it moved, how quickly they'd adapted. If Earth hadn't built those drones in time, if the Resolute's shields had failed just 5 seconds earlier, he shook the thoughts away. There was no time for what-ifs, Admiral, Rohr said one night, catching up with him in the observation dome. Latest readings show unusual Threxan activity near Saturn's orbit. Could be early probes. Hayes looked out into the stars. Then we send a message, he said. That message came in the form of a precision strike. A cloaked Terran vessel, the DDF Phantom, slipped behind the Threxan listening posts and deployed a package of drone swarms and MP mines. The entire enemy installation went dark in under 2 minutes. It was the first strike of the new phase of the war, and it wouldn't be the last. Back on Earth, plans for the global defense grid were finalized. Satellites equipped with planetary-scale shielding tech were positioned in geostationary orbit. These would serve as a last resort buffer, activated only if all else failed. Meanwhile, Earth's allied colonies, Mars, Europa, Titan, were finally pulled into full cooperation. For years, they had maintained semi-autonomous status, but after seeing what nearly happened to Earth, they joined the fold. Mars offered its industrial capabilities. Europa provided cutting-edge water to energy conversion tech. Titan gave raw materials mined from its frozen surface. Humanity wasn't just defending Earth. They were becoming a spacefaring force. 4 months after the second invasion, Hayes stood on the bridge of the newly launched Resolute IE, watching his fleet run final combat drills. 100 ships strong, thousands of personnel, billions watching from home. "They're coming soon," Rohr said quietly. The scouts saw activity. "It's not a question of if, it's when." Hayes gave a quiet nod. "Then let them come." And as the bridge lights dimmed and the ship entered formation, Hayes took a long breath and whispered the words that had become the anthem of Earth's resistance. "This is our home. This is our line. And we hold it." The stars were no longer quiet. Every sensor, every scanner, every deep space listening array screamed the same thing: they were coming. At the edge of the solar system, Thean ships emerged from subspace in terrifying numbers. Fighters, carriers, dreadnoughts, specialized siege cruisers, all bearing the same unmistakable red insignia of a war machine that had conquered hundreds of worlds. This was no longer just a fleet. It was the full wrath of the Thean Empire, and this time they weren't holding back. From the bridge of the TDF Resolute IE, Admiral Hayes stood calmly, eyes fixed on the growing wave of red icons filling his tactical screen. Each symbol represented thousands of lives, thousands of weapons, and a shared belief that Earth could not stand in their way. "Status report," Hayes said, voice steady. "Confirmed visual on enemy force," replied Kaminsky. "They've launched in full formation. Initial scans indicate 5 command dreadnoughts, 37 heavy carriers, nearly 2,000 support and assault-class ships. Estimated strength 3 times what we faced in the second engagement." Captain Rohr, standing beside him, gave a slow whistle. "They're going all in." Hayes nodded. "Then so are we." All across the Earth and its surrounding defenses, final battle stations were declared. Cities went dark as power was rerouted to defensive shields. The global defense grid, once theoretical, now fully operational, activated over the upper atmosphere like a glowing lattice of light. Missiles sat in silos, warheads primed. On the Moon, at Luna Base Alpha, hundreds of long-range railguns were aligned, ready to fire at anything that breached outer perimeter defenses. On Mars, auxiliary fleets began to mobilize. Orbital cannons along Phobos were brought online. Even Earth's colonies, once distant outposts, had become extensions of the battlefield. But the heart of it all remained Earth. The final stand would be here. And no one, not Hayes, not his officers, not the millions watching from bunkers and control centers, had any illusions about the cost. "Engage them on our terms," Hayes ordered. "Bring the fleet into phase line Alpha. No ship breaks formation. Hold position until I give the signal." The Resolute IE moved first, leading a wedge of elite warships into the path of the oncoming storm. Behind them, human ships moved with terrifying precision, veterans of 2 previous engagements, armed with upgraded weapons and experience earned in blood. "Orbital platforms are online," Kaminsky confirmed. "Targeting systems locked and tracking. Drones are launching from carriers 2 through 10, Rohr added. "All AI cores synced. They're awaiting your go." Hayes stared at the swarm of Thean ships advancing, unflinching. Then he gave the order. "Let them feel everything we've built." In a coordinated wave, Earth's orbital defenses opened fire. Gigantic energy pulses and high-velocity rail slugs tore across the void, lighting space with streaks of light. The human fleet joined in, launching a barrage of missiles and beam weapons. The newly developed antimatter lances fired from the Resolute IE, slicing through shields like paper. And then came the drones. Thousands of them, each the size of a car, equipped with rotating weapon arrays and autonomous intelligence, swarmed into the battlefield. engaging the enemy with machine precision and human ruthlessness. The first wave of Theon ships took heavy losses, but they didn't flinch. They responded with overwhelming firepower. Beams of searing energy cut into human lines. Explosions rocked multiple formations. One Terran destroyer, the Vengeance, was hit in the reactor and exploded in a blinding flash, taking several enemy cruisers with it. "Hold the line," Hayes said calmly. "Do not let them split us." But the Theans had come prepared. On the Imperator, the new Thean command ship, Commander Ziak stood tall. "Focus all fire on their center formation," he said. "Break their lead, and the rest will crumble." His voice was cold, calculated. "We've studied their tactics. They rely on formation-based command nodes. Sever the spine, and the body dies." His second-in-command, Exol, nodded. "Our boarding parties are ready as well. Do we initiate?" Ziak's mandibles clicked. "Send them. Let's take their flagship from the inside." Back on the Resolute II, alarms flared. "Multiple boarding craft approaching," Kaminsky shouted. "They're targeting this ship directly." "Activate internal lockdown," Hayes barked. "Seal decks B through D Marines to defense stations. They want the Resolute. They're going to bleed for it." Within minutes, the fight moved inside. Threxan soldiers breached the hull with magnetic drills and plasma torches, flooding the lower decks. They were bigger, stronger, bred for war. But they weren't alone. Human Marines met them with fire and fury. Sergeant Reyes, now promoted and battle-hardened, led one of the defense teams through smoke-filled corridors. "Push forward," he yelled, dodging a blast of alien plasma. "Hold this section, or we lose the whole damn ship." Grenades detonated. Pulse rifles screamed. The hallways of the Resolute IE became a brutal, close-quarters battlefield. Blood, metal, and fire painted every wall. "Command," Arias said, panting into his comms. "Section C secured." "They're pulling back, but not for long." Hayes heard the report and nodded. "Hold it. We're still in the thick of it." In space, the battle was escalating beyond anything ever recorded. Entire regions of space turned into graveyards of metal. Ships collided. Explosions bloomed like miniature stars. Even Earth's own orbit began to accumulate debris. "Sir," Kaminsky called out, "we've lost over 20 ships. Theon reinforcements just entered the outer perimeter." "We're not giving an inch," Hayes said. "All ships maintain formation. Bring online the Helios Protocol." Rohr blinked. "Sir, are we sure?" "Do it." The Helios Protocol had been a last resort weapon, a synchronized pulse from the global defense grid designed to emit a wave of high-frequency disruption across a targeted section of space. Within moments, the orbital satellites realigned. Energy readings spiked. Then the sky went white. The wave ripped across the battlefield, temporarily disabling shield systems on hundreds of Thean vessels. Dozens were immediately destroyed by Terran counterfire. Cheers erupted across several decks of the Resolute IT, but Hayes raised a hand. "We've bloodied them. Now we finish them." On the Imperator, chaos reigned. "Our outer fleets are collapsing," Exol growled. "They used some kind of MP wave. Our shields failed. Then switched to full offense," Ziak screamed. "Burn them from the sky." The final phase of the battle began. Human ships pushed forward into the collapsing Theon formation, firing everything they had. Massive dreadnoughts exchanged direct fire. Destroyers darted between larger ships, launching concentrated bursts. Swarms of drones targeted power cores, slicing through the enemy with surgical accuracy. But the Theans were far from finished. In a last-ditch effort, they threw their elite command ships into the heart of the Terran fleet, triggering suicide runs and overload detonations meant to take out as many defenders as possible. 2 Terran ships were destroyed instantly. A third was crippled. Hayes' ship rocked from multiple impacts. Sparks burst from overhead panels. Damaged crews scrambled across the bridge. Main reactor at 80% capacity, Kaminsky warned. Shields down to 40. We can't take much more. Hayes gritted his teeth. We're not pulling back. Bring the Resolute about. Target the Imperator. We end this now. As the Resolute IEU moved into firing range, the rest of the fleet opened a path. The Imperator, though damaged, was still directing enemy formations. If it fell, the Thean lines would collapse. Target acquired, Kaminsky said. Fire, Hayes commanded. The antimatter lance roared to life. A single glowing beam erupted from the Resolute's core weapon, ripping through the darkness and piercing the hull of the Imperator. The enemy flagship cracked open like an egg. Its core detonated a second later. The explosion illuminated the battlefield for hundreds of kilometers. Ziak was gone, and with him the spine of the Thean force. What followed wasn't a victory march. It was a collapse. Without centralized command, the remaining Thean ships tried to flee, but Earth's fleet gave them no opening. Coordinated strikes disabled engines, jammed communications, and captured what they could. Within an hour, the last Thean vessel was either destroyed, captured, or retreating into the void. Silence fell over the Terran fleet. For the first time in days, no new enemies approached. No reinforcements warped in. Just the wreckage of the fiercest battle the galaxy had ever seen. "We did it," Roar whispered. "We actually did it." Hayes didn't speak for a long moment. Then he turned to the communications officer. "Open a channel to all surviving Terran forces and patch it to every screen on Earth." The officer nodded. Hayes stepped forward, blood still staining his uniform, exhaustion written on every feature. "This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Defense Force," he began. "We have repelled the Thean Empire. Earth is safe for now. But let this day be remembered not as a day of war, but of will." He looked down, then back up. "They came to erase us, to bury our spirit. But they failed. We stood together, we fought as one, and we held the line. The cost was high, but we have shown the galaxy that we will not bow, we will not break, and we will never be conquered." He paused. "Earth stands. Humanity stands. And now we rise." The message echoed across the stars. Smoke still drifted through the upper atmosphere. In the skies above Earth, broken pieces of metal, shattered hulls, and drifting wreckage littered orbit like a ghostly reminder of the war just past. The final battle against the Thean Empire had ended with humanity's unlikely and hard-earned victory, but the wounds were fresh. Ships floated lifeless, blackened from plasma burns. Hull fragments tumbled silently through space. And on every continent, every moon base, every orbital platform, people were trying to understand what came next. On the bridge of the TDF Resolute IE, Admiral Hayes stood at the viewport, watching the stars in silence. Behind him, the lights were low, the bridge quiet. The adrenaline of battle had long faded, replaced by exhaustion, grief, and the crushing weight of responsibility. The war, at least for now, was over. But peace would take longer. Across Earth, the first days after the final battle were filled with a strange mix of silence and noise. News broadcasts looped the same triumphant images: the explosion of the Imperator, the final retreat of the Thean forces, the massive cheer that erupted across Earth's control centers when the signal victory confirmed, flashed across every screen. But behind the headlines were the faces. The medics hunched over wounded soldiers, the engineers crying quietly in the corner of hangars, clutching dog tags, the children watching for parents who never came back. Earth had stood victorious, but victory was a scar. In the ruins of orbit, search and rescue drones sifted through the debris. Ships that had once been symbols of hope now floated in ruin. The TEF Ark, a civilian transport that had rushed in to help during the assault, had been split in two by a suicide run from a Threxan frigate. Its hull still spun slowly, sending out a weak, flickering signal. Every ship had its story, and Earth would remember all of them. Memorial sites began springing up almost immediately. On the surface, at the former training facility in the Australian outback, a sprawling wall was erected, etched with the names of every human who had fallen during the defense of Earth. The wall grew every day. Some families came to place flowers. Others brought items, photos, handwritten notes, even pieces of uniforms. There was no country designation, no rank, no flags, just names. Because in the final hours of the war, everyone had been equal. Back in orbit, Sentinel-1, the massive orbital command station, had become more than just a military hub. It was now the center of Earth's diplomatic future. Representatives from every nation and every surviving human colony gathered in its central chamber to discuss what came next. Hayes, though tired, attended every session. "We stood together when it counted," he told the assembly. "Now we must lead together." There was no applause, just solemn nods. No one wanted to go back to how things were. The days of division, of political posturing and resource hoarding were over. They had looked extinction in the face, and it had changed them. A new council was formed. The Earth Concord, not just a military alliance, but a planetary government meant to handle shared defense, resource distribution, and galactic diplomacy. Humanity was entering a new age, and it would not go alone. In the following months, the debris from the battle was slowly cleared. New technology, harvested from Thean Rex, was cataloged and studied. The AI cores of captured enemy ships were sealed in isolation vaults for further analysis. The drones, once feared by their creators for being too independent, were now refined and regulated, integrated into public safety systems, reconstruction efforts, and exploration initiatives. Former soldiers were given the option to return home or join the first deep space patrols, now tasked with protecting not just Earth, but nearby star systems as well. Exploration resumed, but with caution. The stars no longer seemed as innocent as they once did. On Mars, terraforming efforts accelerated. With CN mining tech now in human hands, they could extract elements faster, stabilize climate bubbles more efficiently. Colonies on Europa, Titan, and Ganymede began to grow. People who once saw space as a distant dream now saw it as a refuge, a second chance. For the first time, humanity wasn't just fighting to survive, it was fighting to build something better. But even with progress, the memory of the war lingered. At Luna Base Alpha, where hundreds of soldiers had lost their lives protecting the long-range defense cannons, a statue was erected. Not of a general, not of a weapon, but of a nameless Marine. Helmet under one arm, rifle slung over the shoulder, staring up at Earth. The plaque read, "They came for our world. We gave them our strength." One evening, months after the battle, Hayes walked alone through the gardens of New Geneva, a city rebuilt as Earth's new capital. The air was cool, trees swayed gently, children laughed in the distance, and yet his mind remained on the silence of space, on the screams of dying soldiers, on the weight of his command. Captain Rohr found him there. "You don't look like a man who just saved a planet," he said gently. Hayes didn't smile. Sometimes saving a world costs more than losing one. They stood in silence. Rohr looked up at the stars. "Do you think they'll come back?" Hayes nodded slowly. "Eventually. If not the Theans, someone else. The galaxy's too big, too ancient. We were lucky this time. Next time, we have to be ready before they arrive." Rohr kicked at a pebble near the path. "We built a fortress, but we also built a target." Hayes finally smiled, faint and tired. "Then let them aim. We've learned how to stand. The lesson we took from the war in the years that followed. Schools taught the story of the invasion, not as a simple tale of triumph or nationalism, but as a turning point in human evolution. They studied how arrogance nearly cost Earth everything, how ignorance of the galaxy's dangers almost led to extinction. But most of all, they studied how ordinary people refused to give in. The war became more than history. It became a warning and a hope, because it proved something no alien empire could erase, that the strength of humanity isn't in its ships or weapons, but in its unity, its courage, and its ability to change. When the stars turned hostile, Earth didn't surrender. When the enemy came with fire, Earth answered with resolve. When the future seemed lost, humanity built one anyway. And though scars remained, they weren't signs of weakness. They were reminders of what it took to survive. In the end, the day the humans answered wasn't just a day of war. It was the birth of something new, a world no longer bound by fear, a species no longer trapped by its past, a promise echoing through the stars. We are here, we are many, and we are ready. Let that be the message to any who dare challenge Earth again, because the day the humans answered was only the beginning.